Is this close enough? I can.
Yeah, you can get right on it.
Closer.
Have you done
Okay.
podcasts before?
I have not done a podcast.
Really?
No, this is my first one.
You seem hip and with it. I figured
Well-
you would have been on one of these things. Welcome to Inside Look. I'm Jeff Lyons, joined by Noah Farmer, the band director for the Green Brigade out there, North High School state champions this year. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
This is a big get for me because I figured after that we wouldn't hear from you again. You'd be busy with more band. But I guess this is kind of your off season.
No, actually, that is the thing about band is it never actually stops. So,
Oh, really?
I actually came from giving lessons to prepare for solo and ensemble, but I'm glad to be here. So thank you for having me.
Okay, well, wow, then you're really squeezing us in, and we doubly appreciate that. So first off, just to give everybody some context here, and I always like to do this too, kind of talk about growing up, where music came into your life, and then how it blossomed from there.
Sure. So music, probably my first memory of really being involved in music was church choir. I had Miss Julie. She was my choir director at First Baptist Church downtown. And I remember learning about whole notes and half notes and quarter notes from her. And that's my first really big memory with that. Going into school, I kind of followed my brother's lead. My brother was a trumpet player. And so I knew that whenever it was my turn, I was going to do music as well. So I started playing saxophone in 5th grade. I started taking lessons with Dr. Addinger. He is a fantastic teacher and saxophone player in the city. And so I went through Cynthia Heights, Perry Heights, and then Wrights High School. I always loved music. I always loved playing saxophone. I always loved being in band. And I really found that as an outlet and an inspiration. So from there, in the middle of high school, I decided, hey, I want to do this forever. I want to be either a band director or a saxophone performer. Like, that was my two things. And I remember very vividly, I was on YouTube just listening to classical saxophone players. And I found this recording that changed my life. And I looked up this performer and I was like, who is this guy? Because I want to study with him. And his name was Dr. Otis Murphy. And it turned out he was the saxophone professor at IU.
Yeah,
and it was
the Jacob School
that's
of Music.
Right. That's
okay.
right. And it was perfect. So I was like, okay, I'm going there because I want to study with that guy. And it kind of worked out because my family, I have so many people who went to IU. So it all was perfect.
And Jacob's you don't just walk in with $20 and a box top. I mean, it's hard to get in there.
That's right. It was extremely competitive. The year that I made it in, they took 4 saxophone players. 4 out of the hundreds that auditioned and submit pre-screening. So that
had to be unnerving, sitting in the hall hearing the other ones before you went in and played your piece.
Absolutely. But it was such a humbling experience, and I learned so much from that school and from that teacher in particular, not just about saxophone but about life. So I really cherish those memories from IU. And, finishing up school at IU, I knew I wanted to come back to Evansville, and I knew that I wanted to be involved in EVSC. And so it just so happened that I knew the band director at North High School, and I reached out to him, and I said, hey, I'd love to student teach there. And I kind of had to beg IU to let me go that far away.
Yeah, they like keeping you in Monroe County
when
at all possible, right? Nobody
Right.
wants to drive anywhere to do evaluations
That's
and
right.
observations. So you got in, though,
So
right?
So I was able to student teach there, and it worked out that the gentleman who had the junior high job, because those schools are connected, Don Travis, he was retiring. And so once again, it just kind of all fell into place that I could apply at North Junior High, and I was given that job. And then the rest is history. So,
and I want to circle back here before we get to the North program. Obviously, you must have marched at Wrights High School, right? And they are known for having a pretty good band program. I hear them practice every day, and they practice every day, at least during the season. Do you remember what the routines were, or were they pretty advanced at that time, or has this whole enterprise really mushroomed?
So it wasn't that far ago that I was in the marching band there. I guess, although now it was 15 years, which feels like it shouldn't be that long.
That's nothing to me. But
the activity then is very similar to what it is now in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I do remember, I have a lot of good memories of friends in that program, and I can still remember the first time that I walked into the bowl as a performer and on that field, and I remember the feeling of looking up and seeing all those people up there, and that was really, really special. And I was lucky to be chosen to be a soloist my senior year. So, kind of the entire show, I'm just running around playing saxophone while the rest of the band is doing the hard work. But all those are really, really good memories for me.
Yeah. So lots of practice. So you knew exactly maybe you didn't know exactly what you were getting into with marching band at Wrights. And then did you do drum corps? Like, in the summer, sometimes some of the younger people go out on the road and perform. Did you ever do that?
So as a saxophone player, that wasn't really an option for me because drum and bugle corps is just percussion and brass. So they'll have trumpets and mellophones and baritones and tubas. So saxophone doesn't fit into that. And I always kind of thought about, I could just learn another instrument and get on the road. And I really did think about that. But at the time, I was just trying to prioritize my saxophone practice. Now, I did end up teaching one summer with the drum corps, Phantom Regiment, which has stayed. They've spent their summers here at Evansville.
Right.
In 20
on the Ohio.
That's right. In 2016, I was on the visual staff with them, and that was a really great experience as well. And it was right as I was going into my teaching career, so it gave me a really great perspective to see, at the highest level what things were doing.
Yeah. How much did you practice a day when you were in your in that period of time in your life?
So I was actually talking with students today about it, trying to kind of help motivate them. I remember at high school. Lunchtime, I skip lunch and I go practice. Actually, I had a little Snoopy metal lunchbox. I would eat that in my class right before lunch, and then I would go down and practice. So that's an hour, and then I would stay after school because the band room was empty, and I would practice in there for a couple hours before I would go home. So high school, it was probably 2 to 4 hours a day. When I got to IU, that's a different story. I was on average probably 5 hours a day practicing.
And how does that work? I mean, when I was and I was not a music student, but I played a little bit when I was at IU. And you go to the practice room at practice building at any time of the day or night, and people would be in these rooms running scales, playing pieces, running scales. It just seemed absolutely miserable to me. I couldn't see how anybody would have the discipline to do that. I mean, how do you keep going? Don't you ever just get sick of a piece? You know what I mean? You just don't even hear it anymore. It's like if you say a word often enough, it doesn't mean anything.
Right. So there were definitely times where you'd cry a little bit in the practice room out of frustration or just doing the same thing over and over again. But the beauty of that school is everybody around you is doing the same thing. And so the kind of the momentum that is around you and the energy is so infectious. And, I would have practice, not dates, but practice meets with my friend, even before our first class. We would always have 8 a.m. classes, and I remember very vividly, we would meet at the practice building as it was being unlocked at 6 a.m. We would go in as quick as we could, we'd set up our instruments, and we would just play scales together for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And so getting to do it as kind of like a family really made it fun because, if you need a little break, you just go to the room next door, you talk to your buddy, you go grab coffee real fast, and you're back at it. And that kind of energy is infectious. And it's actually, I said earlier that I was coming from teaching lessons. It's been quite special because over the years, that energy, I'm starting to see it at North, where kids love to practice together and they kind of motivate each other that way. And that's how we did it.
I never thought of practice as being anything but a solo endeavor, but I guess you're right. And but believe me, you're going to have more traction, I think, in motivating them if they can do it together, right? That's skip your lunch, go sit under the boiler room and practice until you're blue. So I saw your show. Now this was early in the season. They had like an exposition, and all the bands came out and performed. You had these big eyeballs. I see you. And which freaked me out, by the way. I mean, how big were those things?
Okay.
Big balloons, right?
Yeah. So imagine a beach ball. That's kind of the exact same thing there. Yeah. We had 10 of them, and they were 10 feet, like in diameter. Each.
Okay.
Yeah.
It
took 15 minutes to inflate an eyeball.
Well, I wondered about that, transporting these huge eyes, and then they were kind of on stands scattered around. It kind of filled up the field. Visually, there was like not an inch, left over out there. So I want to ask you this. How do you pick the show, like the routine? You call it a show routine?
A show.
A show. Okay. Yeah. So does somebody create that in-house? Do you look at a catalog? Is this your idea? Where does that come from?
There are a lot of different ways that bands choose to go about that process. There are bands that will basically go online and just choose, this is the music I want, this is what I want it to look like, and I'll buy it. Other groups we'll do it in-house. Like the band director will choose the theme and then choose the music and kind of piece it all together. No matter what, you're going to hire somebody to kind of arrange it all and write the drill, write the music, and put it all together for you. What we do at North is we have a program coordinator, and he and I work together to kind of bounce ideas back and forth. He'll kind of bring some ideas, and he'll say, hey, what do you think about this and this and this? And this is what it looked like.
And when is this happening? Like how many months before the season begins?
It's happening now.
Oh, so you're working a year out,
That's
basically.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, and sometimes I'll have an idea and I'll say, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking, and he'll help me make that idea work. So from there, once we have the concept, then it has to go through a whole process, and there's a lot of professionals that are involved to create the show. So it starts out with the idea. Then we have to design costumes, and we have to design props if we're going to use them. And so we have a costume designer he'll do sketches for us, and then we send those sketches to the costume company that will then kind of realize those sketches. So the other piece of that, though, is then we have to go pick music. And so we'll typically pick music that already exists. Like we used "See You Again," which is a pop song by Charlie Puth. We'll get the rights to arrange that, and then we'll kind of cut it up into a splice of how we want the show to flow. Send that splice to a music arranger who writes all the parts for the wind players.
So these are the charts. This is every kid has a part for his or her instrument.
That's right.
Their instrument.
So once it goes to the music arranger, then it has to go to a percussion writer for them to do their thing for the percussionists. Once that music is all where we're going to have it, then the drill writer then sets it. So the drill writer will take the music and write every single dot, we call them coordinates, for every single kid for the 8-minute show. And that usually ends up being, there's about 90 to 110 pages of drill that is synced up with the music. After that, then we have choreographers. So my wife is a choreographer, as is another gentleman who does, like they kind of work together to do the dance and the flag work. And then once you have all those things, then you can start learning the show.
Okay, so by my count, if we started right now, we wouldn't be anywhere near ready until what, May, if we're lucky, June?
If you're
July?
lucky. Well, and that's the thing is, if you were at an early show, then you probably didn't see the entire show.
No, and I was going to bring that up. It seemed like each week I would see, and I didn't see it in sequential weeks. I saw it early and then kind of probably at a North High School football game. And then it was fully real, got more realized, and the props were fully, the eyeballs were there right off the bat, but everything else kind of came together. So how did that, when you have band camp then in the summer, I guess you want to have that in hand, right, to go ahead and get the ball rolling, right?
If you are lucky, you have at least a third of it, I would say.
Yeah.
Typically, we go into band camp with most or all the music. And then you're hoping for at least a movement. We have 4 movements in our show this year. At least a movement, a drill to kind of get it going. But we learned the show, throughout the season. And we didn't actually even finish the show until probably the first week of October or so. And that's completely normal. There are groups that will not finish their show until mid-October or late. And the reason why that all works is because we are trying to teach linearly for students. And so we want to make sure that we're giving them good fundamental skills to start with, and then slowly adding on responsibility, because it's a stamina thing that they have to build up over time, and it's also a concentration thing and an ability thing. It's different than, like, say, putting on a musical where you're not going to do the musical until you can do the whole thing.
Right.
We are doing, because the season is so long, our first performance is end of August, and our last performance is first weekend of November. It's just educationally sound for us to be learning that as we go.
Yeah.
Which is kind of hard to understand for, like, an audience member. If you go to a show in early September, you're
I'd be that guy, because I look and I say, man, okay, yeah, it's good. And, they practice, as I know your band does too. And I always kind of wonder, after I've heard it many, many, many times, and same with hearing just someone practice an instrument, it's like, well, are there diminishing returns? Like, could it possibly be that degree better after the 100th time versus the 400th time? And your ear would tell you what?
Yes,
you can hear a difference, right?
And the other thing that's so unique about the activity, and this is even different from, like concert band, like sitting down, is every single student on the field especially visually, has to contribute at the same level, or else they stick out. You've seen
drop your flag,
right.
or you
and
you
it's
trip.
so
right.
obvious.
Right.
So we can't move on so far that we leave everybody, we leave kids behind, because then they stick out. And that's what's interesting about the activity. And one of the really great things is every single person has to pull their weight. And when it gets down to contest time, there are literally judges walking around on the field sampling, is this kid playing the same way that this kid is? And, they're right in your face, like this close sometimes.
Right.
And so we have to move slow enough that the kid who has never been a marching band before can, by the end of the season, can perform at the same level or as close to a senior who's done it for 6 years.
That's a pretty tall order.
It is.
And you knew you were signing up for this when you
Right.
started at North, right? I mean, obviously you chose it, and you've been very successful with it. My question is, so let's say I'm playing the piccolo. How about that? It's something light that I can tote around. What do I get as far as, okay, you stand on the 50-yard line for X number of beats, and then you take 4 steps over? I mean, how is that communicated so that everybody moves in a coordinated way?
Yeah. So every student has to learn how to read a football field. Basically, what marching band designers have done is they've superimposed a grid on top of a football field. And it's divided into what we call steps. And between every 5 yards, there are 8 steps that are divided in. So if you hear a kid say, we're taking 8 to 5 steps or whatever, that means it's 8 steps for every 5 yards. So you have to learn that measuring stick. And that's a 22.5-inch step, by the way. So that is one piece of the puzzle, that they have to know what an 8 to 5 step is. But they also have to know, okay, well, then now you're going to stand on this count. You're going to stand 3 steps inside of the 45-yard line. And you're going to be 4 steps in front of the front hash. And that's the coordinate that you are. And so then that's dot number 1. Dot number 2, let's say, is 2 steps outside the 45 and 6 steps in front of the front hash. Okay, over the course of 8 counts, you're going to take a straight path, and you're going to take 8 equal steps to get to that next dot.
You've described 2 steps, and in a typical 8-minute routine, show thousands of steps per player, right?
Yep.
It's mind-boggling. I mean, you just sort of look at it, you take it for granted. I guess a lot of people don't understand the preparation that musicians go to make it look easy.
Right.
But this isn't easy by any stretch. No. So how long does it take the typical kid to learn that?
Well, you said 100 times.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. When you think about it, I mean, it's crazy to think about because it's, I said 90 pages of drill. So 90 coordinates you're learning across the course of a football field. And not only are you learning where to stand, but you have to also understand, like, it's stylized the way you get there. At the very foundational level, we're teaching kids a very specific way to move their feet and march. But sometimes you're dancing to that spot. Sometimes you're running to that spot. Sometimes you're doing character. Not to mention, sometimes you're playing something very difficult.
Oh, yeah, we didn't even mention the fact that you're also playing and memorized music?
Memorized,
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody has the little flip thing on their horn
anymore.
Nope,
not anymore.
I'm old.
Yeah. So all that process takes, through November to get it perfect. And yes, if you're, in the community and you're living next to a marching band practice, you're going to hear that same rep over and over again, because again, and especially the bigger the band, the more reps you have to do to get every single kid on board.
Yeah. Well, that clears it up quite a bit because, and again, just as a casual observer, and I've never marched or done that, but yeah, you hear it and you think, well, that was pretty good. That was pretty good again. What could they possibly change to make it any better? And then they play it again. I was like, well, okay, it sounds pretty good to me. And at least in my case, and I'm sure it's the same for you, I just happen to have a window on another high school. They were up at during the fall break, up at dark 30, or actually leading up to state, up early, and they're late. In the rain, it didn't matter. And I guess that's how it has to be, because you can't practice it any place but the football field.
That's
right.
That's right. Now, or a practice lot, a parking lot.
But I mean, that's you can't do it in the gym.
There are some things that we can do inside when we have to, that can kind of reinforce some of those skills. But no, you can't replace being out and doing it on the field, on the move. Let
me ask you this. So we've described, how onerous it is. I mean, just the sheer number of steps and things to learn. What kind of kid signs up for this? Like, how do you recruit? Or
The best kids.
Do kids run up to you and say, please pick me?
The best kids sign up for it. They I mean, we are recruiting kids that signed up for beginning band, basically. And, you know, they learn their instrument. They learn the skills that they need to have to play their instrument, you know, proficiently. When we get to 8th grade, that's when we talk about have the conversation about, okay, you have learned how to do this really great thing with your instrument. Now look at what you can do with it. Because now we can add a visual component and we can add the artistic, you know, now we get to dance, now we get to move and create something bigger than you could ever have expected when you picked up your instrument in 6th grade. So, you know, that's a really, you know, recruitment is quite a dance because every kid needs to hear it in a different way to know, kind of make it click for them.
Right.
And we have, you know, we do a lot of things to try to get them on board. You know, one of the things we do is, you know, I understand this is a huge commitment. And so one of the things that we offer at North is they're basically clinics in the spring where I say, hey, before you make the choice, yes or no, come try it. And usually almost every single time, if I can get a kid to show up and try it with the rest of the group, they're hooked because the energy, as I was talking about earlier, that's created when everybody's doing it together is so infectious and it's so appealing to so many kids because of the social aspect, but also the opportunity to be excellent at something. I still think that really speaks to kids. So, you know, it's not for every kid. Not every kid goes for it. Some kids get what they need from a sport or another club. And we do a lot, you know, I work around everybody's schedules to get as many people as I can involved. But we've been fortunate to be able to kind of blossom in terms of numbers just because of all those things.
You talked about the commitment for the kids. Let's talk about the parents and the families a little bit because you always see the pit crew everybody rolling props out, and it's often parents. It probably not exclusively parents. There probably are grandparents out there, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, whomever. How do you sell them on that idea? And they are absolutely dedicated. You know, you see the same ones week after week after week. And I'll think, boy, the poor guy down there with a keyboard, you know, that must be an awful gig. So how do you bring them on board?
So where I start with it is, you know, as your child is going into high school, it becomes more difficult to stay connected with them, right? They have more freedom, they have more activities. And so one of the things that I think makes it appealing to parents is, hey, you get to spend a Saturday with your kid. You know, you may not get to be with them for 8 hours, but you get to watch them do what they love, and then you get to support them through that. And we're really fortunate to have parents that are really motivated, you know, to support their student. And what's beautiful is that the parents that do spend a lot of time in the program is it becomes not just their kid, it becomes all of the kids that they love to support.
They're band parents.
That's right. And so I guess that's how we get away with asking them to show up at 2 a.m. on some days and drive a semi all the way up to Indianapolis. But truthfully, we couldn't do it without them. And we owe so much to them because they're putting in their Saturdays too. Yeah. And, you know, they don't get to go out on the field and get a trophy. So we are so fortunate to have amazing parents at North. And, you know, across the EVSC, I know so many parents are just so committed to what we do.
What kind of fundraising do you have to do to support this? I'm not going to ask the price tag, but I can assume by everything you've told me, we're talking major bucks to put on a show for any school of your size or of that scope of production. So how do you do that? Because as we know, the schools aren't just handing out money,
right?
Especially for the arts. So I'm sure you're pretty much on your own to come up with money.
So I will say EVSC, we're so lucky to have support that way. So, you know, EVSC has purchased and provides, I would say, 99% of the instruments that are in the kids' hands in all the bands in the EVSC. So right off the bat, you know, EVSC does really support the arts.
Yeah. I didn't mean EVSC. I meant,
sure,
like, you know,
I understand.
nobody,
Yes.
Taxpayers are always, I don't want my money going to, you know, all that stuff.
So the fundraising piece, though, and this is kind of unique, I think, to band. You know, when we set a band fee, it's basically about half of what it actually costs per student to have the activity. Yeah. And so the other half of that has to come from fundraising. So the big ticket items, we're so lucky to have the fall festival opportunity, and I think every marching band just about has a booth in the fall festival, and that's a huge source.
I've eaten at all of them, so
that's
I'm doing
right.
my part. That's right.
Booth 68 next year, everybody. We also every school in the EVSC also hosts an invitational, so a contest, and that is another huge source of revenue for us. Is the gate and the concessions from that.
Sure.
And I like that one a lot because it's also an educational and a performance opportunity for kids. So
yeah, and I've been to a few of those, and it's interesting to see everybody's show for that year and what they're going to do, and then see them later, because usually the contests are kind of early in the season, and then by the time you all are in Indianapolis, these are fully fleshed out, fully practiced, ready to go.
Yep.
So describe the bus ride to Indianapolis on the day of state. Do you make everybody stay absolutely quiet and save their energy, or is there no hope of that?
Well, okay, so I have learned that I have to budget kids' focus, and if I expect them to focus too long, they can't sustain it through the performance. So I kind of let them do their thing, as long as it doesn't impact anybody else or get anybody in trouble. Obviously, they're just relaxed, and they're I really think if kids are not relaxed, they can't perform their best. So they enjoy their bus ride up, and then they know though that once we get into the warm up room, it's go time, and we'll have, the way it works is there's a 15-minute physical warm up, and then there is a 30-minute music warm up. The physical warm up, getting off the bus, we just we do some running in place, do a little bit of stretching. That's very, very loose still. But once we get into our breathing and singing and then playing, that's when they really lock it in. And so basically 30 minutes before the performance all the way through, so that's like a 45-minute chunk of time, they really, really lock it in, and it's pretty intense.
Are you able to see the other performing groups, or are you waiting in the wings, so to speak, to then come out and do your thing and then wait for the award? I guess you would see everybody after you, or no?
Sometimes,
I don't know how that works.
And it depends on the show. Unfortunately, we don't really get the opportunity to watch other bands very often because we're usually in warm-up. We actually are exposed to bands more often in the warm-up room. Like at Lucas Oil, there are these huge ballrooms that are underneath the stadium, and you're sharing that with another band, and there's like a curtain between, so it's really loud. But that's actually where you experience another band the most, because you spend 30 minutes listening to them play too. But no, basically the way marching band shows work is it's so regimented that it's you have this much time to get on the field, you do your thing, you get off the field, and you get out. And then after that, it's pack up the equipment truck, and that's another neat thing that kids learn, is that responsibility of, hey, not only do we have to go do the thing, but we have to make sure that all our stuff gets there. We have to pack it ourselves, and then we have to bring it back home and put it away, which I think is another, kind of like valuable like side skill that we learned from that activity.
They can be movers, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
If all else fails,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right. So, and of course you won, so mission accomplished for you. And this isn't your first time winning the whole thing, which is a testament, I think, to your method and everything you've told me here so far. So now the bus ride home, they scream the whole way, or is everybody just wiped out?
That is a mix, and we travel with 4 buses, so all the buses have different personalities. In that situation, I think it was pretty much lights out tired, because that's a long day and a lot of adrenaline that gets going. The thing that I always tell kids, though, because there is celebration, obviously, is it's really important to me that whether you win or you lose, you do it the right way, and you don't let your celebration or lack thereof impact anybody else's celebration or lack thereof. So it's really important to me that kids win the right way and they lose the right way, because people are watching that. And I think that's a part of life, is it doesn't always go your way, and so you have to know how to handle that.
Great information. I'm so glad that you came on here. And now, are you going to tell me what you're doing next year, or is that top secret?
I can't share it yet, but we are working. I do have ideas.
I'll tell you what, you have my number. If you want to come and break it here on the Inside
Hey,
Look
that
podcast,
would be something,
that's
man.
right.
That'll get you the viewers.
That's right. Well, we can only hope. Noah Farmer, thank you so much for
much.
taking time out. You've got a lesson here in 10 minutes, so you've
Right.
got time to stuff down a cheeseburger and do that. If you'd like to hear all of our podcasts, you can do that wherever you get your podcasts. Just search Inside Look with Jeff Lyons. We also are on our 14 News YouTube channel, and be sure to check out our companion podcast, What's the Trend, with Aaron Weeks and Casey Mason. With Noah Farmer, I'm Jeff Lyons. Thanks for joining Inside Look.